Hi, Neil, are you there? You're still on mute.
Sorry about that. Hi, Veronica. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Um, I saw some of you a couple of days ago in Concord, and I'll see some of you next week in Burbank. Today's presentation, as Veronica said, is in the lower left-hand corner of the screen that you can download right now and save for later. I think you would have received an email of this as well if you registered yesterday. So we're going to go over the slides today. We also have Jeff Roberts from Product Ops, and he will walk through the Nova part of the presentation. And we'll try to make this as simple as possible. We have some tools available for you. We have questions and answers, all kinds of stuff. So let's get started. We have quite a few people on board, and so we don't want to take up too much of your afternoon. So let's look at the agenda. I'll go over the requirements as far as the budget bill. We'll talk briefly about hours of instruction, what that means. We'll also talk about operating costs and fund sources. And then I'll turn it over to Jeff, and he'll go through the NOVA processing of how to enter the data, how to certify it, that kind of thing. And then to close, I'll go over some frequently asked questions that were posted, but we can also have some discussion during the presentation. You can always ask questions in the chat. We'll try to get to them. If we're in the middle of something, you might just have to be patient and wait for our response. Sometimes we tag team. If it's more policy related, you might have to wait for me to answer. If it's more technical, you might have to wait for Jeff to answer. Okay, so let's go on to the budget bill requirements. So this was from last year's budget, and it was a requirement for 17-18 data. And so there's a couple of parts to this budget bill requirement. The first part of it is related to hours of instruction by program areas. And that means entering validated data from your local or state level system. And when we mean local or state level system, that would be validated hourly data either from your local attendance system, from TOPS Pro system, or if you're using a state system on the community college side, you would get a 320 report and you would look at your hours that way, but you would have to break that out by program area. So all of this data is due February 15th into NOVA, and we'll cover how to enter that into NOVA a little bit later. The second part is operating costs by program area. That would include all kinds of operating costs. Usually you think of just the 1,000s through 7,000s, but we also want to get any in-kind or overhead or building costs, custodial costs, utilities that we don't normally see, as well as in addition to adult ed funds or WIOA 2 funds, we want to see if there's other fund sources out there that you receive through fees, through donations, through other grants, through contracts. We want to show the legislature the true cost of running an adult program. And that data is also due February 15th. So those two areas we're going to cover as part of today's webinar, but that's kind of the gist of the legislative requirements. We sent out a reporting instruction memo. It was dated November 2nd, I think I can read there. We have that posted on the website. I think Veronica will post a link to that if anybody wants the link to this document that we sent out to everyone at the member level. So you should have received that. If you didn't, Veronica will post that in the chat, and you can access that soon. In fact, here's the memo right there. But hopefully we can pull that URL, like Veronica said, and she'll post it in the chat momentarily. So what we did in that memo or letter was instructions to all consortia members, leads, directors, and co-chairs. It included background, just like I gave you. It provided operational definitions, some methodology, some examples, screenshots, process steps in NOVA, and FAQs or Q&As. And we'll go over some of this today. We can't go over everything But if you want more detail, I would access that, that document. So moving on to some of the key facts for this effort. Oh, thank you, Veronica. So if you look into the chat, there's the file right there. You can access that and save that for later. So when we talk about program areas, we're talking only about the 7 adult ed program areas. Not if you're a community college, not the 10, or if you're a K-12 adult, we're not including those other ones like older adults or ones that weren't included in the 7 program areas. So it's just focused on those 7 program areas. And the term hours of instruction is defined as any reportable individual that has at least 1 hour of program-related services or instruction in our system. Some people were a little confused saying, does that mean they have to be in a classroom? It just means if you recorded that student and you recorded hours, then that's what you would be taking out of your system. Now, some people don't record services in their systems. Some people wait till they get to the classroom. So I think for the most part, it will be instructional hours, but some agencies do track hours of services. So if they did it that way and correctly entered it into TopsPro or into their attendance system, and they can validate it, we'll take that as well. If you didn't enter any hours, like you kept sign-in sheets, if you're doing some kind of outside recruitment or whatever, and you didn't enter it into any local attendance system or into TopsPro, or it's not recorded in your college system, then you are not required, and we don't want you to make this up or add it in after. It has to be validated by your local attendance system or by TopsPro or the college system that you're using. In case we get questions from the legislature, we want to go back and validate those numbers. And so the time period is July 1st, 2017, ending June 30th, 2018. So it's that 17-18 fiscal year, and we're just looking at that time frame. And so if you didn't spend all your funds during that time, you don't have to report your allocations, just the money you spent, and only the hours that are validated in your systems, not hours that you didn't quantify in a system, or somehow you just had a sign-up sheet and you didn't have that data entered into your attendance system. We don't want you to go through the effort of trying to create something that's not available or not existent. So I'll pause there for a second as we get into a little more detail on the hours of instruction to see if anybody has any questions. And while we're waiting for some questions, here are some of those data sources that I was referring to in hours of instruction. So you can use TopsPro, you can use your local attendance system, and you can use your what they call 320 report if you're a college for non-credit FTS. But you would have to break that out by program area. So we're saying this must be a verifiable attendance system or state-approved source. Can't be sign-in sheets or something that wasn't entered and validated in the system. So let's look at the questions here. Jessica says, our service hours are marked other in TopsPro. When you run the instructional hours report in TopsPro, it doesn't include other. That's difficult. I think for this year, we want to make sure that when you run that report in TopsPro by program area, that's going to be validating what you have. So if you didn't mark that with the program area and it gets into an other, I mean, it would be difficult to say, how you divided that up. I mean, that's something maybe you could look at possibly prorating, but I don't know. That sounds like it might be a stretch. I don't know how you would use your methodology to estimate or prorate. It sounds like it possibly wouldn't be verifiable. So I would just stick to what you can validate through your attendance system. If you have the backup in your attendance system and it wasn't in TopsPro, maybe you can just use the data out of your attendance system as validation. And Burr asks 7 AEP programs. Later in the slide deck, it asks to report fee-based funds. So yes, 7 program areas, some programs charge fees. So if you're at the college, you might have a parking fee, health fee, book fee, I don't know if there's registration fees. At the K-12 adult school or county office, you might be charging for CTE. You might have book fees in certain programs. You might have some parking fees, I'm not sure. But there are definitely fees associated with that, and those would be restricted to the 7 program areas. But I think for the most part, on the K-12 adult side, that would be career technical education, because there's ed code against charging fees for ASE, ABE, ESL. But if there's any book fees or other type of fees that are charged, I mean, we really want to look at this as a possibility. If the legislature wants to make adult education free, what would that cost? Because I don't think they realize that all the small fees that we charge students. So adult education definitely isn't free. There are costs that we pass on to the students. Is ASAP accessible? Yes. So whatever your local attendance system is that you use, in the old days when we had the ADA system, you would have to get a letter from CDE saying my attendance system is validated for reporting ADA. We don't have that anymore, but we would assume those attendance systems that you're using are most qualified, unless you're comfortable using the TOPS Pro report, which already has the hours in there, split out by program area. Let's see. So Burr is follow-up. My point is some fee-based programs are outside of AEP, so they don't support the 7 programs, so it seems reporting that we're excusing. So we would only be reporting on adult education 7 program areas. We would not be reporting any community service programs, any community ed programs, any kind of fee-based program that doesn't require the same credentialing and data reporting that's required under the Adult Ed Block Grant, now soon to be called the California Adult Ed Program. So hopefully that is clear, Burr. We do not want to focus on fee-based programs that are outside the preview of the Adult Ed program. So that would be the credentialing, the student data reporting, those kind of requirements for those 7 program areas. And then Jody says, going forward for the future reporting, we should be capturing services provided in attendance systems, correct? Yes, I would attempt to do that. I know there's a lot of services provided on the college side, especially if you have a credit college. That seems to be a problem last year in 17-18. It was tough to quantify that data, so we might have some trouble with that, but we have to start somewhere. And so going forward, like Jody said, we should be looking at how we're going to capture those services in our attendance system. Right now it's a little murky. I'm not going to say it's perfect. We do have some gaps. We do have some issues with those credit colleges that maybe weren't using TOPS Pro or not using it for all the student hours. We do have a whole conglomerate or lump of service hours that don't tie to any program areas, which was the question by Jessica earlier. Let's see. Christina says, this morning I generated the AEP report, both 17-18, 18-19. I have only one data element, hours of instruction, disaggregated by program area. The number of enrollees is missing from the table. So I would call, Christina, I would call CASAS, because they have several reports you can use, and I'm going to show you how to access those reports. But there's a simple, first report is program area with hours, and that's the NOVA report. And then there's subsequent reports with a lot more detail. All we want for this exercise is hours, program area. We don't want to know about enrollees. We don't want to know about 12 hours or more of instruction. We just want to know hours, program area, and that's a report that CASAS has created in their system, and it's called the NOVA report. and we'll go over that in a little bit. Let's see, just to clarify, we should report hours. The instructor was set to teach the class, not the hours that each student attended, right? No, I would report whatever's in your attendance system or whatever's in TOPS Pro. So hopefully that's clear. It's whatever you reported into your attendance system. So if you go, or if you go into TOPS Pro and you look at hours of instruction, those would be the hours by the program area. And so we don't want you to go back and do anything. We just want you to take that information out of the your attendance system or TOPS Pro. So Suzanne Murphy said, what about CPR and food safety? Well, if they're a CTE course under adult ed and this teacher is credentialed and you're following all the requirements of adult education, then yes. If you offered it as a fee-based class for, OSHA and CPR certification and you charged a fee and the teacher wasn't credentialed and you're not following, those education code requirements, then that would be one of those fee-based classes like Burr's referring to that would be outside the scope of this effort. So we're not looking at community ed or community service. We're looking at adult ed with all the bells and whistles of credentialing and the requirements that come along with that. Okay. And Mina ran the report. It only has one data element, hours of instruction. So you got to run the NOVA report. And I think we might have someone from CASAS that might be on the call today that can assist. I'm going to show you in a second, but let me just get through some of these questions. And let's see, our program uses Inmentum, an online program for a high school diploma. Pull reports from that program for each student, and they use those hours to report into TOPS Pro. Is that okay to use for this report as well? Yes, as long as that's a verifiable attendance system, you have that data in TOPS Pro, you have some checks and balances that you can double check on that, I think that would be fine. So what does a community college with no non-credit report? So if they don't have any non-credit classes and they were not helping you going out to the adult school, providing some articulation or information, things like that to your students, then they wouldn't report any hours. If they can't report credit classes, they can only report non-credit classes. If they were offering services, but they didn't record it, it wouldn't show up in TOPS Pro. If they were reporting services and they didn't code it to a program area, it would be in that big lump and it would be tough to decipher. So you could just put a 0 for that if it's not verifiable. So we want those actual hours, as Judy said. Right, okay, so when I get to slide 35, I'll take a look at it. CPR is ServSafe as part of WorkFest entry, Carolyn. As long as your teachers are credentialed for that and it falls under the adult ed block grant or the adult ed program, you're okay. So how do we pull hours for non-credit online classes? We use census formula for the hours on your course outline. So what I would do is do the same thing for the distance that we use distance learning, and we report those hours in TOPS the same way. And I can take that offline with Chrissy, or we can have someone follow up on you. That's a little more detailed. So please follow up with me, Chrissy, on that one. And then Carolyn says PD and credentialing costs reportable. I'm not understanding the question, Carolyn. You'd only report the hours of instruction, but anyway. So Erica says, Caroline, if you could clarify that question. And Erica says, if we are part of two consortia which we report separately, do we add all funds in the leverage funds table? Do we report the same leverage funds in each consortium? So Erica, if you're one of those ones that have multiple consortia, I would just submit one report. I don't know, maybe because there's only a few of you, let's think through that, because we'd like to have it separated out, but maybe each of these scenarios might be a little different. Maybe all your costs are going towards one consortia, or if they're evenly split. So Erica, why don't you email me offline and we'll talk through that, because we only have about 6 in the state that have multiple consortia. So that's another one that's a little bit more complex than we want to deal with today, and we can take that offline. So Joanne says the report in COSPRO is called AEP program hours. Okay. So no reporting for fee-based courses without a non-credentialed teacher. So yeah, if it's community service, community ed, contract ed, we don't want that data. If it's a regular CTE course with a credentialed teacher and you charge a fee, we want that information. Okay, so let's move on. Good questions, a lot of questions. So here's what we're talking about. And this was given to me by Jay Wright, who couldn't make the call today, but he said in TE, go to the reports, click on state reports, go to California, and AEP program hours to generate a NOVA compatible view of hours of instruction. So I would try that out. If you do have questions, you can always email CASAS, that's aebg@casas.org, and they can help you with that. Here's another take on it. AEP program hours include options to generate a simple view, which would be the NOVA compatible, or views with more details about enrollee. So maybe that's the one people were getting confused with. Maybe they clicked on the first one that had a lot more detail when all you need to do is click on the NOVA compatible. Okay, let's move on to, so we're going to get out of hours of instruction, but let's take one last question from Christine. To clarify, we are only reporting on instructional hours for AEP funded courses, not other adult ed course trainings funded by WIOA, Perkins. Sorry if you already, no, I didn't answer this, but no, we are reporting on all instructional hours for those 7 program areas regardless of funding. So to turn your question upside down, we want to hear about all the hours in ABE that was funded by adult ed, state funds, by WIOA, by Perkins, by Strong Workforce, by private funds, by fees, which probably isn't true for ABE, by donations, by social services, CalWorks, you name it. So, and this would feed into the operational cost. So we are looking at multiple fund sources, and it's really what's driving it is the 7 program areas. So however those hours were funded, as long as they were in the 7 program areas, and you're operating a legit adult ed class, not a community service class or a community ed class or a contract ed class, we want those hours. And it doesn't matter who funded the class. Hopefully that makes sense. Okay, thank you. All right, so let's move on to, a quick trigger finger there. The term operational costs, and I'll try to head off some of these questions, but I know it's a little detail when we go into operational costs, so bear with me. So operational costs is defined as the true cost of running adult education programs. So when the legislature yesterday gave us an additional $18 million to get our program up to about $540 million, they're interested in our program, so they haven't forgot about us, but they're also interested in why we still charge fees for CTE. They're interested in what's the true cost of, serving the adult student. And so this kind of exercise will help us. And there's a lot of discussion about, we need to bring back the ADA model. And so they want to see, the hours that we're generating, is that really close to the amount of funds that we're giving you? Is there some kind of additional amount, and what's the best methodology to give us additional funds. So all this information helps make those educated decisions, ways, using a needs-based system versus an hourly system. And so that's why this information is so important. We don't want to overestimate it, and we don't want to just come up with numbers because you think you're gaming the system. We just want to have that open discussion. Right now we're getting $540 million based on need. We don't have to give hours. We don't have to give performance. We don't have to do any of that stuff. But this information helps continue that funding and maybe get us more funding. And then we look at different mechanisms of possibly, getting us back to that 800, 900 million that we had before flexibility. So, okay, so really quick question, Carolyn. So would operational costs include DP and credentialing that we pay for? Yeah, it would include all those costs, 1,000 through 7,000 or 6,000, and any additional costs, that we don't normally report on. So if you're helping a student with credentialing or professional development or anything, the cost to run the program. So if you have to pay for someone's travel to go to professional development in New Orleans this year, then that would have been included in that 17-18 cost. Okay, so let's look at what that includes. So true cost of running the adult ed program includes space, utilities, custodial, overhead, equipment. Carolyn was saying professional development, travel, credentialing if you pay for that, all those things. We'd also include administrative costs, and this would be in all areas of adult education non-credit programs, those 7 program areas. So Christy says when it states admin costs for those who oversee all areas of non-credit, would that include non-K? No, it just include the 7, not the parenting, older adults, health and safety, those kind of things, just the 7 program areas. Okay, so thank you. So we are a little confused in how to report costs for a student that's enrolled in both credit and non-credit. For example, a CalWORK student is enrolled in 3 credit courses and 1 non-credit. Do we count the CalWORKs funds spent on that student? So this is where, let me see, I think my next slide kind of covers it. So yeah, here it is. In some districts, these costs may be difficult to separate or identify specifically to adult education / non-credit programs. We encourage districts to prorate these costs and use an allocation methodology that would estimate the true cost of running the adult education non-credit program. The allocation methodology must be aligned with what is used by your district accounting office or meets their approval. So in the question there, if you have a student that's enrolled in credit and non-credit, you would talk to your business office, maybe your institutional researcher, and look at a methodology that they would say makes sense for prorating or calculating the true cost of that student to the non-credit adult ed 7 program area. So hopefully that makes sense. I mean, that's not going to be easy, and in some cases, you might have a lot of examples where you do have those students enrolled in programs that are outside of adult education or adult school programming or non-credit programming. So, so bear with us and work with your business office and your institutional researcher to come up with the methodology that would work. And that's the best we can do for now, because we don't have something that's standardized across all agencies right now. Okay, so next question. We report these operational costs year to date. When is the report due? So this is for 17-18, July 1st, 2017 to June 30th, 2018. So it was last year. And these will be due February 15th into NOVA of 2019. So if you do year-to-date, you'll have 2017, I guess year-to-date, a half year of that, and you'll have a half year of 2018 if you do year-to-date. And so those should already be available to you. All right. So along with those operating costs, and this leads back to a question somebody had earlier about fund sources, it's not just adult ed state funds, it's also other funding sources, like they mentioned CalWORKs and Perkins and fees and donations and you name it. So I'll just read here from the slide. Not only will districts enter the true cost of running adult ed programs, they will also enter into NOVA the various fund sources that contribute to these operational costs. And it's not limited to just those 6 main sources from the Ed Code 84916, and that would be Perkins, LCFF, WIO2, CalWORKs, jail funds, and non-credit apportionment. So those 6 will be included, but we also want to see if you get any strong workforce, if you get any other grants, if you get workability, if you get contract services, you name it. And so, yeah, the fees, contract services, Wheel 1, strong workforce, student support, in-kind, etc. Let's see if I'm caught up on the questions there. But not revenue generated from community ed enrichment fee-based programs, right? Correct. Thank you for confirming that, Burr. I know that gets a little sensitive out in the field because I was seeing in some cases people were confusing community ed and community enrichment, and they were spending adult ed state funds in there, and those teachers were non-credential. And so we want to stay away from, there's a I don't want to say a wall, there's a boundary. There's a boundary between those programs, and we don't want to blur the line there. Kristen said, last I looked, there was not a line for private grants funding. Has that been added? I think, and we'll ask Jeff if they're in the other, if there's kind of an other category, or if we can add something. So Kristen, keep that for when we get to the NOVA section, and we'll have Jeff explain that. And Christy said, looking at NOVA, I don't see where I can input the other funds such as Strong Workforce SSP. So that's something we'll have Jeff walk us through. He can show us where that drop down is for other, and you have to be logged on into NOVA as the person entering in that data to see that. If you don't have access, you won't be able to see that screen. I mean, Chris, so what about WIO funded contract ed? So if it's contract ed, we want to stay away from that. It has to be, in those 7 program areas. Contract ed, community ed, those have special ed code requirements and regulation. They're self-sufficient budgets. They shouldn't be commingled with our funding. And so it's a little difficult to bring those into the mix because then it confuses things. So for now, we're going to keep that separate. Okay. So we also have, with all the questions we're getting today, we've created a budget bill requirement Google group, and TAP has invited most of you, or in fact, I think they've sent it out to all of you. We have, 100, 150 members, and that's where you can go to share best practices, post questions, have dialogue with other people in other districts, have dialogue with the state office, with me, and we can bat around ideas like we're talking about today. So Lori says define contract ed. So contract ed is a separate program where it's a community college program, and it contracts with the employer for programs and students, and it's set up specifically and outside of kind of the adult ed program. And it has its own regulations in the community college system. So Jody said we're reporting on program operating costs, not consortium operating costs. Right. So these reports are only by individual members, so at the district level. So we don't want to really get into the consortia overall cost. That can get a little confusing. And do not include consortium operating costs. Well, if you can, if you're the member that is the fiscal agent or the coordinating consortia body, and you do incur those costs, you can report those in those exercises. If you can separate that out. So Jody, I would encourage that if you can figure that out, and you would include those costs because that's the cost of running your adult school as well as your consortium, which your adult school is part of, and kind of a main focal point. Okay, thank you, Veronica, for the Google group. And please follow up on that. And then Marina says, at community college, do we take into account the cost of facility even if adult ed is not paying the faculty's salary? Yes, so if your community college is running a non-credit program, cost of faculty, and the faculty are teaching these non-credit programs, and you're using like non-credit apportionment and not the adult ed funds, but they're teaching one of our 7 program areas, I would include that non-credit apportionment as an operating expense and a fund source. So let's say you operate a bunch of non-credit courses that's paid for by apportionment, and then you operate 3 courses in CTE that are paid for by the adult ed block grant or the adult ed program. We would want to include all those non-credit, including the adult ed program, in this exercise because we're trying to see the true cost of running non-credit in the community college and adult education at the K-12 adult school or county office or ROP. And so that would include those other fund sources. So at the community college, you're running a lot of non-credit programming that's paid for by apportionment, not by adult ed block grant or adult ed program funds. And so we'd want to see what's the cost there so we can see the true cost of what it is to run adult education. So hopefully that makes sense. Ooh. And I'm going to turn it over to Jeff, and I'll try to answer questions in the chat while Jeff comes on board. So Jeff, are you there? Okay.
Thanks, Neil. I am. Can you hear me?
Great. I'm going to mute my. Yeah, I can. Maybe Veronica, is Jeff hearing things correctly? Can you check?
I can hear you. I can hear you just fine, Neil.
Oh, okay. All right. I'm going to mute my microphone right now and turn it over.
Okay. Thank you, Veronica. I think you need to get me to share my screen. Just let me know if that's happening or not.
Jeff,
Yes.
you can do it from your screen. Just go up top to the 4 lines with the downward facing arrow and go to share my screen and select the desktop that you would like to share.
Sorry about that.
That's
We
okay.
did do that in practice.
That's okay.
Share my screen.
There you go.
All right. Here we go. All right. So I'd like to show everyone first how you navigate to where the program area reporting is. Once you've logged in to NOVA, you would go to the Programs menu item, click on AEBG, and then move down to Program Area Reporting. And what you'll see here is a dashboard that shows all the consortiums and gives you a quick status of what's saved or what's submitted. So first thing you want to do is pick the year you're going to report for, which is 17-18. So right here we're going to work with Allen Hancock College Consortium. You can see that there are 2 members in this consortium, and the status is over here. I don't know if you can see my mouse pointer or not, but to the right here in the card you'll see 0 of 2 saved and 0 of 2 submitted, and that means that no one has done this reporting yet. So to start your reporting, you would click on the consortium, and here you're in the area. Again, just make sure you're on the right year. So we're going to report for 17-18. You would go to your member agency, click on that, and here's where you would enter your program area hours of instruction. And as Neil described, there are 7 here that need to be completed. All you need to do is fill in at least one of these to get validation to pass on this screen. So I'll go ahead and put some hours in here. And I can put some in here. And tab out of the fields. You'll see at the bottom here that it totals up the number of hours that, that you've got entered so far. You click the next button. And now you'll see over here in the status in the workflow that you've completed the program area's validation. So now we move on to leverage funds. And there was a question about entering additional funds. And Neil, I forget which type of fund they were interested in, but you can see in the drop-down list here that there are several options. In-kind contributions, I think it might have been Strong Workforce, K-12 College. You just pick one of these that you need to add from the list, and then you can click the Add Selected Fund button, and you'll see that it'll show up at the bottom. So here's where you can report your money for this one. We'll put $10,000 in here and tab out, and we can put some in for AEBG here as well. So now you'll see we get a total over here for all of the AEBG is 4,500. We total the columns and the rows. And if you need to enter another additional funding source, you can pick another one for donations. We'll enter that. And we can put in $5,000 here. Pretty generous person. We'll click Next. And now we're done. So we have the program area hours are complete, the leverage funds are complete, and now you have an option of saving estimates, and this is so that you can work on this throughout the fiscal year and not have to do it all at once. So if you want, you can save estimates, and then you get a little alert here that explains about saving the estimates, and then you can save that. And now the estimates are saved. So on or before the date that these are due, you'd want to come back here and submit your actuals for this one. So we'll do that, submit actuals, a little alert. Now they're submitted. So we can go back to the consortium page and we'll see that I've submitted for Allen Hancock. I'll go back and do Lompoc, and we'll do this the same way. Click Next. We have leverage funds. We can enter some money in here and click Next. And now we can save estimates. Or we can just go ahead and submit our actuals. So now that the actuals are submitted, the certifying authority, which in this case is Sophia, can go ahead and certify these. If for some reason you've submitted these and you've determined that you've made a mistake, you can go back in and you can unsubmit, and then you can go back and you can edit. Now we're in draft mode again, and we can go back and edit. So there's one other thing I'd like to show in Neil's PowerPoint. There's the idea here of an optional member. So Eden Area in this case, let's go back to 2017, 2018. Eden Area in this case is a member, but a non-funded member for this year. So they show up here as optional. So they can submit data here if they like, if they're required or not, but they're not required to because they're not funded. So Veronica, is there any more, any questions or anything that people would like answered?
Jeff, I'm looking at, I think you answered Marisol's question about deleting an added fund if you choose the wrong fund. I think you took care of that one. Judy confirmed with me that these funds are, this is expended funds, not allocated funds. So
okay.
These would be funds you're reporting as allocated, and they'd have to be validated by some kind of accounting system that the district had on site. And then Chrissy asked, am I correct that you will need to go back to other grants to see the amount spent only during 17-18 for projects such as Strong Workforce that are funded for multiple years? Yes, we're only looking at July 1st, 2017 to June 30th, 2018 expenditure data only. So not allocations. If it's multi-funded, not the total amount, it's only what you spent. So you could get $1 million grant, and maybe in that first year you only spent $50,000. So you only want to report the $50,000, not the $1 million. Kristen says, please clarify, are we reporting dollars received or dollars spent? It's dollars spent because it's asking for operating expenses for your program during the year, so it would be dollars spent. Because if we reported dollars received, it really wouldn't tell us the true cost of running a program for those 12 months. Are all non-funded members showing up as operational? Jeff, that's accurate, right? All non-funded members in 17-18 would show up optional, like Eden
Yes.
did in your example?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And then Judy says, in select new fund, can you type in a new type or just select from the drop-down list? Meaning, if you don't see something there that meets your needs, can you type in a new one?
You cannot. These are
or
the
you
ones.
limited?
You're limited to what's in the list.
Okay. So Judy, you would have to decide on the drop-down list, and we did have a field group to try to get an exhaustive list, and this is what we came up with. And so if for some reason this list doesn't meet your needs, you're going to have to select what we have that's closest to it. And so other state grants or other federal grants is probably those catch-alls, unfortunately. But you can always email us if there's something that you put in there that maybe was not, that you thought was a large amount that we didn't have it on the drop-down, and we can consider it for next year. Let's see. In the case of our consortium, number of members did not get their CalWORKs funds during that time. We are reporting, so the funds will not be reflected. That's fine. Is there an other category to explain the source if not listed? So we have, I don't know, Jeff, we have, what, about 12 or 15 different categories, I think, listed on there of fund sources?
Fund sources?
Quite a few?
Yeah, there's quite a few.
Yeah. So Suzanne, if we don't have another category, and so you can always email us just to tell us, you know, I had this fund, I didn't think it fit, and I used state funds, and this is what it should be. I think we couldn't go to the nth degree on this. We couldn't give an unlimited amount of choices. So just bear with us on this and try to pick the closest source that makes sense. So Heidi asked, is member representative the only designation that can enter this information, or can member contacts enter? What's the requirement on the data entry, Jeff?
That's a good question, and that's correct. Member contacts and member representatives can edit or add to these reports. A member representative can edit and submit, and a primary contact can certify.
Okay. All right, and then Francisco says, our college non-credit programs are placed in various disciplines. However, ESL and some short-term vocational courses are partially funded by AEP. Do I need to report the expenses for these courses only or for the entire non-credit programs in the college? So, Francisco, I would report all non-credit programs at the college that align with our 7 program areas. And so that would be career tech ed, that would include adult basic ed, adult secondary, ESL, if they offer anything remotely connected to K-12 success, which might be parenting, adults with disabilities, pre-apprenticeship, those kind of things would all be listed under CTE. even if they're paid for by non-credit apportionment or strong workforce funds, some of our non-credit programming did get access to those funds. So we'd want to see that reported as well, not just the adult ed funding. So we want the true cost of what's coming in to run that adult school or that college or the program during the 17-18 fiscal year. So Bill says, give us some guidance on LCFF dollars to support a concurrent class so students are not AE, but the class does deliver both to concurrent and AE students. It is leveraging the resources. So Bill, I would say try to prorate that. So let's say the district's giving you the classroom or letting you access to certain things. Try to, come up with the cost of in-kind, what that was, and if there's other LCFF support that goes along with it, try to do a proration based on the number of adult students, 18 and over, that are in the class, or if they are under 18 and they have the local board approval, those would be okay as well. So, do your best. I know this isn't going to be an exact science. It's our first go around, but we'll continue to get better on that. And then Christy says, not sure if you answered this. Can you explain community college supportive services? And wonder if we need to try and figure out facilities costs that non-credit does not pay for specifically. Example, shared classrooms on the credit college, shared staff, custodial, and assist with non-credit. So what I would do, Chrissy, meet with your business office or your accounting people, tell them what we're trying to do, see if they can come up with a methodology to give you a non-credit share of those facilities, utilities, custodial, those overhead costs, and try to standardize it for your college. And that's the amount I would use. I wouldn't try to go into too much detail to try to calculate that individually. It might drive you crazy. And I think your accounting people could do a proration as long as they're okay with it and they can verify that with the data they have. I think I would do that. And that would be probably the safest way to do that. So hopefully that helps. Okay, any additional questions for Jeff? These are all great questions. Oh, I missed a few. I'm sorry. So if our Perkins were spent outside the 7 program areas, do we include these expenses? So if you have funds that were like Perkins, LCFF, what would be another one, CalWORKS, that were spent outside the 7 program areas, do not report those. We only want the ones that were spent within the 7 program areas. And then does primary contact have to certify by February 15th? Yes. So this year we're kind of doing everything all at once because we didn't have enough time. And so work with your members to get it submitted. And then as soon as you get it submitted, the primary will certify. And hopefully you can get that all done by February 15th. Because what's going to happen is we're going to take this data, we're going to start developing an analysis and a report that we can share with the legislature of how this went, what were some of the problems we encountered, where are some of the difficulties like you're explaining today, where are the system gaps, where we have trouble splitting hours, all those kind of issues that come up when we do these kind of exercises, we're going to point out to the legislature so they don't run out and say, oh, we've got the model. We can say, well, this is with the caveats going forward, we couldn't quantify this, we had a problem with this didn't work, so we're going to list all those things out. So that kind of information will be helpful, and it'll be great to get all that data in by the 15th, because that's going to take a couple of months to sift through, probably 3 or 4 months. And we might have follow-up. In fact, Judy Mortrud from class is going to be helping us, and she'll be contacting some of you kind of to do focus groups on this exercise and what it meant to you and what were some of the things that you couldn't do or that you did do that you felt comfortable with, some of the areas you didn't feel comfortable with. So we're going to get a chance to express, you get a chance to express some of your concerns in this process. I don't know if the legislature thought through how difficult this might be, but we are going to go through the process, and we are going to collect the data, and we are going to listen to you on what happened during the process. And we'll get some feedback from the legislature as a result of that, and we'll see going forward what kind of modifications we can make for the following year. And I think Judy says, if you find a standard procedure for this, please share via the Google Doc. Right. So Chrissy, if your accounting people have some kind of methodology that they are using, please share out on the Google board or whatever it's the Google, what is it called, Veronica? What do we call that? Is it the Google group, I want to say? Okay. And Christy, yes, I agree. I think it'll be the most complicated part of the report. And yes, Google group. Okay. So any additional NOVA questions? Let's see if we can stump Jeff. He hasn't been stumped yet. He's answered every single question you've thrown at him. I don't see anybody typing. So let's move on. Thank you, Jeff. Okay, so we're going to skip through. Jeff kind of shared this on the screen, so let me just skip through these. My apologies for skipping slides, but we've already covered this. And let's get to the FAQs. So this might generate further questions, but this was in the document that Veronica loaded at the beginning of this exercise. And Judy said, send me an email if you're interested in being contacted for a short interview on this process. So if you really hate this process and you're really upset, or you really enjoyed it, send Judy an email. We'd like either side of the argument here. So anyway, okay. So here's the question. What if a student received 30 minutes of counseling? Does that mean that the student service for the student should not be reported? If you're a college, and I think this question came from a college, you can use your 320 report or your TOPS-Pro report. If your system does not track in minor increments, like under an hour, so in this case like 30 minutes, and you did not track these services in your attendance system, then you wouldn't report these in NOVA because you don't have any system verification. So, these incremental hours that somehow have accumulated, you've gone out to an adult school to do some counseling, but you have these sign-in sheets, and you're estimating what might have been like 45 minutes per student, but you didn't enter it anywhere. We don't want you to go and kind of dream it up or fabricate it. It has to be in one of the systems, whether it's your attendance system or your TOPS-Pro system or your college system. So here's another one. Just to clarify, for instructional hours, we should report only for non-credit classes, not for any credit classes that would fall under the 7 program areas, correct? And that is correct. Yes, it's only hours for non-credit classes in the 7 program areas. And I think we've covered that a couple of times. Our system tracks hours if they are enrolled in a course, so job development services would be in other programs, which tracks dates, but not hours. So getting back to that, previous question, you wouldn't be able to report any hours for these services because they'd have to be verifiable hours. And so if you didn't track hours and you just track dates, that wouldn't be acceptable. I think, let's see, Chrissy says, can we use our SARS system to verify the data? If your SARS system is your attendance system, all of our counseling appointments are in a separate system, but it's not in a, So if SARS is not your attendance system, are you taking those counseling appointments and putting them into your attendance system? If you're not, that would be kind of, I don't know. Would that be something that if you were audited, that you would be able to justify, Christy. That's something I would talk with your accounting people. So if under a single audit or a state audit, would they be comfortable with that data being included? Are you kind of making that up and they don't have any way of a report to backtrack to that? I would check with them. And then Kristen says, so to confirm a fifth time, we're reporting supportive service hours, not just classroom instructional hours. Yes, but you'd have to designate it by program in your attendance system or in TopsPro. So if you track the service hours and somehow they're in this big lump, it's going to be difficult to validate where those hours go to, which program, because the legislature wants the hours by program area. So some people did track services by program area. Most of the time, it didn't coordinate or align with a program area until later on, and maybe that student only came in for a couple hours and left and never came back and never attended a classroom in a program area. And so it would be difficult, but if you do have that documentation, you could report and use those service hours. Christy says it tracks appointment and hours, but we do not put them in an attendance system. I will talk to my district regarding the audit. Great. Yeah. I would work that back through your accounting office and things like that. If students are studying and assessing an online program to study for QuickBooks Excel class, can we count those attendance hours? So like tutoring, non-supervised tutoring, that's not really a program area. I would say if you did have verifiable information and it was tied to a program area and it's in your attendance system and you could validate it, if audited, I would say yes. But if it's not connected and not verifiable and it would be kind of red flaggish on an audit, I wouldn't include that. So it'd have to be pretty clean. Okay, so let me go back to the question. So Beth said, what about hours spent on online instructional classes for completing high school diploma? The time is trackable, verifiable in the system. Yeah, so for online, I think we're going to have a separate conversation about this, but you use that distance learning model, and I don't have that per se off the top of my head, but it's the way of tracking that, and I'll get back to you on that. Jay Wright was able to explain that the last time we talked about that, and I don't have that information off the top of my head, but for online, there is a way to do that. We don't have a policy at the state level, but there is a way in TopsPro that we do record distance learning, distance education, and that would be the methodology that we would use. So I think it was Beth and somebody else that had that question. Please email me, and we'll follow up with CASAS on recommendations on how to record that in NOVA. So thank you for bringing that up. Okay, so another FAQ. We reported students receiving counseling under supportive service, under supportive services. Are we only reporting instruction, not supportive services? This is kind of the question that Kristen just brought up. And I said in the FAQ, we are tracking all reportable individuals 1 hour or more of services and or instruction if you entered the student record hours in TopsPro, and then you can report that in NOVA for this exercise. The problem with that is we need to know it by program area, and that's where it gets difficult. And so if you were able to designate a program area, so if it was counseling as part of a CTE pathway, or some kind of service related to like workforce prep, and you're getting into a nursing program and that was part of that, I mean, that should all be related to the program, and that would be easy to track. If it was just general services, it would be difficult to split out because you don't have that verifiable data. You know where you report hours for supported service and TOPS. So this was given to me by CASAS. Use the student update record to report service hours in PE, just like you would for class hours. It would be helpful to identify a program area by creating a class. So that's how you would do it in TopsPro. If you didn't do it, then we have that difficulty of how would you designate a program area? Okay. Are we only marked that as we only marked that they receive services and TOPS, we did not report hours. So it looks like they only reported services, not hours. So getting back to the question that came up several times today, it's year one. We will continue to provide technical assistance on the student data reporting. If you did not report hours, you will not be penalized. So if you provided the services, didn't track the hours, it's not like we're going to come down on you and cut your funding. That's not the way this is going to work. This is just informational. So if you don't have those hours, you don't have to make them up. You don't have to go out and try to find sign-up sheets and somehow create it. We don't want you to do that. We just want you to take what's in your reporting system or in TOPS Pro or in your college reporting and enter that into NOVA. What specific report do we run in TOPS Pro to get instructional hours based on program? And so I think that's the one where we go to this. We've seen this before. And this. Click on that NOVA compatible button to get those hours. And it's pretty self-explanatory when you get into here. There's program areas and there's hours, and you can just type that right into NOVA. If your attendance system has something else, then you might want to use your attendance system, whichever one you feel more comfortable with or represents what was really happening. Okay, so I think these are more operational expense questions. Does that mean we include dollars even if we did not claim them via AEBG or adult ed programming? Yes, we are tracking all operational costs regardless of fund source. Therefore, this goes beyond AEBG. This would include student fees, apportionment, LCFF, grants, donations, CalWORKs, Perkins, you name it. Regarding operational costs, if ours exceeds the amount of AEP funding, do we include the portion not covered by these funds? Yes, please include all revenue even if they exceed AEBG funding. Is it okay not to match the 17-18 budget? Correct. This is what was expensed in 17-18, meaning the cost of running your program. In 17-18, sometimes you will not spend all of your annual allocation. Here's another one. How will we report the indirect? Should we split that out by program area? And I said indirect can be prorated among your program areas. Another question is, should we estimate in-kind services, like if the library lets us use their space, or just actual costs? We have a line item in NOVA to report in-kind contributions, so yes, you could report that. And let's see, there's a couple of questions. What about hours spent? Okay, we have that. So Bill says, is there any way more dollars can come out to the field like data money came out before? All of this is new work that has become new and added cost. Just to fill out all those new reports and all the required data tracking, you know, this is killing us slowly. The cost for data collection is coming out of funds that are not available to students and programs. So we can ask. They gave us $18 million in this year's budget, this coming budget, but it's probably going to be eaten up by teacher costs, cost of living, those kind of things. And that's something, Bill, that we can point out in the report. And we can say that there was a price tag attached to doing these exercises. And so like Judy was saying, I would encourage you to all document the decisions you're making as you complete this first year of NOVA reporting. This will get ready for next year. And so if there were concerns, we want to hear about those. And so Judy's going to help us document that. So that's something I would communicate with Judy, and she will put that in the report, Bill. Thank you. Is there a formula, back to the question, so is there a formula or process for estimating the cost of in-kind? So this has been a little difficult, and we understand we don't want you spending too much time on it. Because in-kind is determined by the MOU or local agreement, estimating process may vary. You can check what was reported in your WIOA 2 financials. So if you're a WIOA 2 grantee, you're required to do this. You can use that information. Or you can check with your business and accounting office on a basic calculation to estimate in-kind services. Just be sure your in-kind is related to the adult ed program areas and its operation. You know, when I looked at the federal guidelines on this for in-kind, it says you generally should determine the cost using fair market value based on a standard objective sources rather than best guesses. Document the basis for determining the value of personal services, material equipment, building, and land. So we're trying to make this simple. Use a standard, whether it's the federal standard through your WIOA 2 or a basis that your accounting office wants you to use. I would stick with that. And then, will you give us a tool or recommendation for allocation methodology we should use? And we responded, you can prorate your allocations by enrollment percentages or another methodology recommended by your accounting or business office. Please define in-kind. In-kind is non-monetary contribution, goods or services offered free or at less than usual charge, resulting in an in-kind contribution. In-kind would include building utilities or only volunteer. It includes non-monetary contributions such as goods or services. That would include all of the above. And getting back to the Google group, so if you want to continue this conversation further, please use the Google group to type in questions, make comments, ask for examples, and there hasn't been too much traffic, but maybe after today we'll have more traffic, or as we get closer to the 15th, you might have questions that come up or want clarification. That's probably the best way to get that clarification. We, meaning me, and the TAP monitor the Google group. So if there are questions that come up and you want a quick response, we will respond to that. So Jody asked, and I think this is our last slide, or here's the deadline reminder, and I think that's about it. So Jody asked, determining in-kind costs when a facility is being offered for the use of a CTE class with equipment is going to be difficult. Good topic for Google group. Yeah, we'll see how people are deciding on that. I mean, we have the federal methodology, but in some cases, you know, it's not one size fits all. So there are going to be difficult scenarios like the one Jody's describing in her question there or comment. Okay, so deadline reminder, all hours and expenses must be certified by February 15th. That's a little more than a month from now. This means members should be entering this information now in order for consortia to review and certify. So work with your primary contact, your consortia lead, to see how much time they'll need. Maybe they just need you to enter it on the 14th and they're going to certify it on the 15th. Or maybe you enter it in the morning of the 15th and they certify it in the afternoon on the 15th. Or maybe they want it sooner. And like I said, the state is generating a report for the legislature using this data, so the timing of this report is critical. Please do not delay. So we will be following up with you. And of course, a lot of this information, the memo and some of the other things are posted on the website. If you can't find it or have further questions or need to get into that Google group, please contact TAP. And Francisco, how do we access the Google group? I think Veronica did send or post the, I think it was an email or a link to go access it or request a logon. I think Veronica is going to post that again. So we have a few more minutes. Any additional questions? I think Veronica is going to post that Google Group, send a request to TAP, and we will send you an invitation. So Francisco, that is tap@aubg.org, I believe. If we pay reduced rent to another consortium member to conduct classes at their facility, would that be in-kind or expense or both? So I think it would be both, because if you're paying a reduced rent, you're getting a break, someone's chipping in to give you that break, and so the full cost is X, and it's a combination of in-kind and what you paid. So I think, Chrissy, that would be both. Now, those are the kind of weird ones that you're going to just have to figure out, and it's going to be, like you said, ugly. So please document these, and we'll definitely document these scenarios of how difficult it is to find out these costs. And then maybe we don't have to do as much next year if we find out that it's so difficult to do. But as you can see, it is always good to document all your expenses, show them how much leverage funds we're using, unseen overhead that we use as part of the adult ed program, because we used to be at $800 million. If you include the college non-credit apportionment, we're over $1 billion, and so right now we're still way below that, and so we need to show what that true cost is. So I know it's a laborious exercise, but hopefully it'll pay dividends in the long run. But if it is killing us, well, we'd want to know that too, so we can stop putting you through craziness if this isn't working out. And so we'd like to hear, like Judy said, all sides of this exercise. Veronica asks, when and how will we know if we have to do it again next year? I mean, we're planning to do it. I think we're going to do something like this every year. It's just a question of how much detail we're going to go through. So we will be done kind of massaging the data probably by this summer. I know that CDE wants all the adult ed program members to enter in expenses estimates by program area, because they need that data to give to the Federal Department of Education as a requirement for receiving the WIOA 2 literacy funds. And so at a minimum, we're going to be calculating our expenses of state funds or non-federal funds for that match. So I can guarantee you that every year we will be going through, at least at a minimum, that exercise. Now, whether we're going to do the in-kind and all that other stuff, it'll remain to be seen, or maybe we can come up with a methodology that'll make it easier. So more to follow on that. And then Connie says we have about 30 off-site classes. We need to document site use, including utilities for all of them. So Connie, I would say work with your accounting office to see if they can come up with a cost per site or a general cost per site that you can multiply by 30 rather than trying to figure out for each individual site. So if they can come up with a reasonable average per site and make it easier for you, I think that would be the best thing to do. I mean, we can't expect you to spend all that time trying to calculate 30 individual sites. And so if you can come up with an average and use that, I think that would be helpful. But you have your accounting people say, yeah, this is a kind of the best methodology to use. And then Kristen said, I do think there is a possibility that for members who receive small amounts of funding might consider the funding not worth the amount of reporting required. This might put them over the edge. Just my 2 cents. And so they can always, I mean, if they don't want to do this or they don't have the capacity, they can always put in 0. I mean, it doesn't help us. They're not going to be penalized, but they can put in 0, and it can allow the thing to go forward. It doesn't help us, but we don't want them, dropping out. So that is always an option. We're not going to, we don't have the ability to go out and, rattle cages and double check and this and that. It's up to the consortia leads. So do what you can. If it is going to be for the small programs, a laborious task, tell them to do the best they can and see what they can do. Okay. So we still have some time. Kristen, does that help? I mean, we can enter 0 reports if possible. So that is always an option. Not the number 1 option, but it is an option if you're having problems with those smaller programs. And we do have we have over 400 members out there. We have probably 100 small districts that it's one person running everything. And so this would definitely be a huge workload item for them. So just try to work with them, and we understand. Okay, with that, let's see. So just recapping this week's events, we got $18 million in the governor's budget. That brings us up to about $540 million. So that rebenches our base. So now we'll be getting $540 million every year. We will have to go through the exercise in the CFAD of figuring out, like we did last year, who gets what of the COLA. It's a smaller COLA, so it's not the $25.6 million, it's $18 million. So you will have to go through the exercise in the CFAD and have that determined by May 2nd when that's submitted. We will try to streamline our funding disbursement. We know that we're about 6 months behind on that funding disbursement and that it's coming out in the next few weeks. We will look at other options on how to get that money out to you sooner. There is a way to do that, but it's politically sensitive, so we have to look at all options, what people are willing to live with. What else? Quarter 2 is due at the end of the month if you are reporting into TOPS Pro, reminding those colleges that if you're non-WIOA, that all your data is being pulled from MIS. If you're a WIOA 2 college, we're pulling your data through MIS as well as through TOPS Pro for the WIOA 2 side. So you're having to report that information twice. So we're apologizing for that. Christy asked, is the $540 million the new base? Yes, so that would be just like the prior year when we were at 525 or so. Now we're 526, I forget. So now an additional 18 million should get us close. I think it's 539, so I'm rounding up, but it might be, the true amount might be 539. So that would be our new base. So anytime we get a COLA, that adds to the base. So that's good news. And we'll use the formula for dividing that 18 million up. So the way it goes, some consortia might receive more than others. And then you'll have to have those meetings, public meetings, to decide of that increase that you got over last year, who gets what. And so that'll be interesting. Hopefully it won't take as long as the COLA last year, because we got that COLA late, and that presented problems because we had to revise our CFAD, which really caused a lot of problems. In fact, we were still, working through that a few months ago, just trying to solidify the CFADs for that new COLA amount. So hopefully we won't have that problem this year. All right. So Veronica, if you want to come back on, I'd like to thank Jeff from Product Ops for helping out today and answering questions. And thank you to Veronica for behind the scenes running the webinar today, and we appreciate all the questions from everyone and comments. And thank you, and please join the Google groups. Email Judy if you want to be part of that report out as far as what's working, what's not, concerns, those kind of things. Judy'd love to hear from you. And we look forward to chatting on the Google group. If you get into any binds and don't know what to do, we have about 150 people, or could be more, that view those comments. And I'll be watching that as well. But it's always great to hear what people in the field are doing, because there might be some innovative practices out there that we didn't know about. So thank you, everyone, and look forward to next week. We have a webinar on Tuesday, and the next 3 Tuesdays we have planning webinars. So if you're ratcheting up for your 3-year plan, this will be your last chance to listen to kind of a recap of the 3-year planning and asset mapping, and filling out the template and submitting that in June of this year. So I'll bring back Veronica with some closing comments, and thank you all.
Thank you, Neil, and thank you to Jeff, as well as the participants on the line, in addition to our new team member, Liberty, for participating today. I have posted the URL to register for the upcoming 3-year plan webinar mini-series. As Neil stated, the first one will take place on Tuesday, January the 15th, and that webinar will be based on pre-planning and the self-assessment, so taking a deeper dive into that. In addition, I posted the URL of where the webinar recording, the chat transcript, as well as the PowerPoint presentation will be located. After the webinar, once we close the webinar and do a little cleanup work, we will post those resources, so they will be available by the end of today. So please be sure to check out those resources if you would like to refer to this particular webinar. I am about to close the webinar, and when I do, the evaluation will appear. Please be sure to fill out this evaluation and let Neil and Jeff know what you thought about today's presentation, and if there are any additional technical assistance or professional development needs you may have. As always, the Technical Assistance Project TAP is available to assist you, so please be sure to send us an email at tap@aupg.org or give us a telephone call at 888-827-2324. We are always available to assist you. Thank you all very much, and have a great weekend.